for protecting our natural resources, not only can we preserve what we have and celebrate that, but it's also an opportunity to educate those in our community that just aren't as familiar with what it takes to save these places, what the value of these places are. So having that educational opportunity creates and fosters growth and future champions for the environments and the communities that we have. In addition to our natural resources and what it can offer, is these are great spaces that help us to create unique recreational opportunities so people can gather and go and recreate, and therefore healthier communities. So kind of back to that sustainable communities ideologies, is that it fosters that social well-being aspect when we look at preserving our environmental resources. So one of the next topics that you wanted to talk about is, how do we protect these things? What are the defining mechanisms that we have in each of our communities to kind of set that bar and tell people what it is that we're looking at? So one of the first things that I wanted to show you is that, this is a lot of what we see in our communities is we see some traditional development. And so on your left of your screen, you'll see that this is more of a traditional subdivision layout and a traditional roadway design. It really designs towards vehicles. It designs towards roadways and having that easy infrastructure. But what's missing from here is, how do you access those natural resources, such as the creek? Where are the people supposed to walk and get out and have a sense of community? Where are they supposed to walk in the south in the shade in the summer? So there's better ways to do this type of development. Here's an example of just low impact development practices and what we can all evaluate in each of our communities. This case study here is an example in Auburn, Alabama, that was done as part of a collaboration with the Auburn Extension Service, a local developer, the county, and the city is rewriting their code so that we established a subdivision conservation ordinance. Is basically, they raised the bar. They had a developer that said, we have this property, we're going to develop it in the traditional way, but hey, if y'all can tell us a better way to do it, we'll come to the table and we'll do it that way. So this development was started about 10 years ago and has been being built out. And the plan that you see on the left is a site plan that was developed with a conservation subdivision guidelines. So what it does is it basically required that the roadways be more narrow and also incorporate places for trees and sidewalks. It allowed for interspersed community green space throughout the development. And then this one also implemented several other low impact development practices and best management practices. I think we had 10 different ones. And if you go to some of the stormwater resources and everything we'll share after the presentation today, is that there's over 150 types of BMP. So they match different scales of development, and you can incorporate from narrow roadways to stormwater infiltration swells and things like that, so that you can get these into the development. And then these also serve as community green spaces as well. So just some examples of low impact development on a large scale. And of course, this is having to look at how are your codes written? What will your town and your cities allow? And then what needs to be done to raise that bar. So I'm not going to go too much into detail for that, but I'll give you a little teaser that we do have an expert on writing codes and development that will be doing another lunchtime talk here in the next couple of months. The deep dive into stormwater. Why do we need to be looking at stormwater? These are some traditional methods of stormwater, of piping our water away and sending it on down the line so it becomes someone else's problems. And we are starting to see more and more impacts on an aging infrastructure about what this is. Some of the historic flooding we saw last week, when pipes are hidden, we can't see where the breaks are. And the truth is that water will find a way. And so it starts to undermine other elements of your community, such as roadways and walkways and things like that. And we can't rule out that there is the human factor that impacts stormwater too. Um, up in the top right hand of this image, you'll see is that this is all of the trash and debris that can go into storm systems just because of litter control. So when we take a step back and we look at what that opportunity in preserving our natural resources and educating the public can do, it can alleviate issues such as litter and human contributions to elements that we see and issues that we see with stormwater. But there's also some design methods that we can do to address this. We can start considering stormwater as an asset and an amenity rather than turning our back on it and piping it away for somebody else to deal with. And so a few different ways that we can do this in public spaces and even down to our own home sites and yards is we can look at pervious paving. We can look at opportunities for water to infiltrate back into the ground rather than doing surface runoff and creating erosion. We can start to open up our stormwater channels and create those as stormwater amenities. And then also making our streets do double duty. So looking at our streets and our streetscapes as an opportunity to harness that water and celebrate that water in rainy days and to sustain all the living plant material in the trees and the different type of planting that can take both drought conditions as well as flood conditions. So these are some examples of integrated stormwater management that we have seen used throughout the country and in various scales here within Alabama as well. So it's really just taking that opportunity at the beginning of designing a project or dealing with any issue is how can we improve this? How can we do this better? How can we open things up and not hide it away? And so some more examples of this. So on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see that stormwater can really create public spaces and have an opportunity woven in here for that environmental education, collecting water for reuse as irrigation within our parks and public spaces, looking at our parking lots instead of being massively paved areas and crowning and sodding all of our interior parking islands with one little tree or a few shrubs in the middle is how can we depress those and actually use those as an opportunity to collect the water and allow that water to infiltrate back into the ground. So the other opportunity that we see is a great place for us to start challenging current thinking and practices and looking at ways that we can sustain our community is just reevaluating our approach to traditional landscape design and maintenance. We all love our lawns. For those that, we put a lot of effort into taking care of the lawns. It's just a Southern thing. Right? It's really not a Southern thing. It's all around. But what this does is it really opens us up to using pesticides and harming our environment and using equipment that also contributes to environmental impacts. Looking at what does the value of the planting provide? When we use a lot of non-native planting, a lot of evergreens, looking at these images you see in the top right and the bottom left in particular, this plant material for the most part has very little contribution to habitat and everything for our wildlife and our bees, which is kind of the foundation for all of our ecological cycle. And so we look at, how can we create a richer tapestry of landscape? That if this is what everybody is used to seeing, if this is what is available at our nurseries, then this is what is going to be everyone's habit to go out and to purchase, these same type of materials. And to be able to, there's just not much variety. And in some cases, even the plant material from traditional landscape availability is harmful to the environment. The Nandina that's pictured on the bottom left. So the berries for the Nandina, everybody loves the red berries. They love the fall color. They love that it's evergreen. It has all of these traditional landscape design benefits to it. But actually, those berries, another thing, are very harmful to our native wildlife and to the birds. And so they're poisoning. We're basically planting poison in our garden. So we've got to change the way that, what is the availability out there and what is the perception. And then also down to other maintenance practices. So this is an alley or a tree-lined street, what should be a tree-lined street in the bottom right of crepe myrtles. So it's a non-native tree, and traditional landscape maintenance practices come in and chop these off. And so not only are they unsightly, but it also takes away from our tree canopy. So it takes a few months, and these trees could have a nice, gorgeous tree canopy that helps to shade the heat impact from the streets and provide shade to the walkers on the sidewalk. But when you have a tree that we have more of the landscape maintenance practices that promote chopping these things off. These are just mindsets that we have to change in order to better provide contributing and regenerative design in our communities. Okay, so what could it look like? What are our options, right? Here's what we have to do. We have to change perceptions of the landscape, and we have to look at what are the environmental benefits of the landscapes that we're designing. What are the environmental benefits of the landscapes that we are promoting and celebrating? And so if you look at these pictures, they're a little bit wild and loose. They're not your traditional formal garden design, but there is an abundance of benefit in the images that you see and in the gardens that you see. So you have less maintenance, you have less pesticides. If you're using native planting, they already have the natural built-in capability against most of our pests. And then there are low water requirements. So you're not taxing that already limited resource that gets pretty expensive. You're not mowing and spending all of that time on that type of activity. But you have to change the perceptions. We have to change the perceptions about what is beautiful. And the more these types of landscapes are integrated into our civic areas, it offers an opportunity to teach people down to the homeowner about the value and the benefit of these type of landscapes, and then what also they offer as habitat for our native wildlife. And so this brings in the butterflies. Landscapes such as this is what brings in the dragonflies, which eat the mosquitoes, which make it much more palatable to sit outside in the summer here in Alabama. So this is a big challenge of what we have to do and what we can do within our landscapes to just change perceptions and start thinking along that mindset about what value do I have, even down to the plant that I'm choosing to put in my yard. So irrigation, we do have significant heat here in the South. I think we're planning for record-setting temperatures next week, and with our plant materials, especially those that are in more of our downtowns or urban environments of any scales, wherever we have more paving, they really need a little bit of a boost, irrigation boost. But this doesn't have to be something that is really taxing to our system. There's some creative and sustainable ways to do this, such as cistern collection. Cisterns can be just a rain barrel that is in the bottom of a rain chain from your roof that you have a spigot at the bottom of, and connect a hose and irrigate your landscape, to a large scale above ground or underground cistern that collects the storm water that you can set up an automatic irrigation system from. But when you do those automatic irrigation systems, we highly recommend that you invest in some type of weather station. So the weather station that we're showing here at the top center is much smarter weather station. It has all the bells and whistles in it, but this can be just as simple as a rain gauge that tells the irrigation system when it's rained enough that it doesn't need to turn on and operate. Frequently, we drive by even municipal properties, and during the middle of a deluge, the irrigation is running. So that can be controlled with less dependence on human interaction, but just more automatic just by putting in a simple weather station controller for that. There's also the opportunities as you look at your green spaces and as you look at the integrated stormwater opportunities, you can build on those. An example at the bottom is Homewood Central Park that was redone several years ago. But in the center of the park, this was previously a concrete channelized drainage way. And so Griffin Brook was opened up, and there is a central pool area that collects the natural runoff that comes through the area. And for establishment of the lawn and the green spaces, this pool was used to irrigate from. So there was no supplemental irrigation to the system. It wasn't paying for the tap and the meter and the additional cost and fees into having a traditional water line is being able to harness that stormwater that always comes through the site and be able to help with the establishment of the park. And since then, it's operated just periodically. The top right images shows an example of really, there's not much to see here. There is an irrigation system, but what you don't see is that this is from a building that harnessed all of the condensate. It's a hospital building, so it had a lot of air conditioning needs within the building, and there is a lot of condensation being produced. So that was an opportunity rather than tying into your typical water supply system and irrigation main line, is we were able to harness through a cistern is all of the condensate water that typically goes into storm and contributes to different storm and flooding issues, but be able to utilize that on site and keep all of that water on site and make it work for us. Okay. So I'm getting kind of closer to the end of the presentation, but with a few things is you're looking at your communities and what you can do from a sustainable design standpoint, just for development, transportation, different environmental stormwater needs, is you first have to know your codes. So we encourage anybody that's working within their community, whether you are in charge of those municipal regulations or you're a developer or a community leader that just wants to know and influence more of that, is you just have to know what you have. To be able to raise the bar and influence and improve your governance is you have to know what you have. And so there's the opportunity there to do a little bit of research, figure out how you can start to promote and integrate more of these sustainable devices down to just how the civic greens are maintained and what landscape is changed out to. So, why invest in sustainable design? People ask this, why fix what's broken? Well, I think we have already established that there's a lot of things that are not necessarily broken, but they don't work quite as well. And there's definitely opportunities to improve the different aspects of design within our communities. And why is that? Is it conserves our natural resources and it builds on our assets. As I mentioned earlier, these are the areas, the special places that we can't get back. So these are the ones that once we build over them, once we blow through them, once we take down our trees that have been there for 100 years, waiting 100 years for that tree canopy to establish versus having the mechanisms in place that preserve those. Also, our communities have a tendency to embrace what inspires them. If, it is a landscape or a city or a neighborhood that creates joy, then they will promote that and they will celebrate that. And that's what ends up drawing more economic dollars into your communities because they're actually they're promoting your communities. And then it creates an environmental balance. So the idea that we are not harming the environment, but we're starting to contribute and add back to our environment. And so we as humans can create our developments and all of these opportunities where we are actually promoting an environmental balance and not being just taking. There's a return on investment. So we've looked at the dollars and cents, and I didn't get a lot into that today. But in future talks and things like that, is a return on investment for the practices that we've shown today. Is even down to the stormwater, is typically, if it is done correctly and from the get-go, the integrated stormwater methods are showing that they are coming in 20% less than some of our traditional pipe methods. And so there is a very quick return on investment. When you invest in some type of smart irrigation system, there's a very quick return on investment that can be done for that. So you can actually take all of these practices that we've talked about today, and you can look at the dollars and cents down to that. And then at the end of the day, these things just enhance the quality of life. It's one of the opportunities that we see to really promote and celebrate our communities and just provide something else for our community. So with that, I'll kind of wrap up and open it up to questions. We'll be sending out more links to all the different resources that we use for this, and all the different resources for integrated stormwater design, such as the Alabama Extension Service, and some plant palettes and things like that. So please feel free to ask questions. I have a comment about Nandina and saying that someone else has heard it's been discussed in their community in green space discussions, and it's common. I mean, it is one of the most common plants. If you go to any local garden center, it's there, and we have learned more and more in recent years. The Birmingham Audubon Society is a great resource to go to kind of see the value in the plant material you have. And so that's great to get that written into city codes, to even just starting to look at standard city practices, and then what we could do in our own yards and landscapes. Okay, and also about the crepe myrtle. Yeah, alternate tree suggestions. So there are a lot of alternates to a crepe myrtle. It really depends on where you're putting the tree. If it is, and for example, in the streetscape image that I showed, there's tree pallets for native tree plantings that do well in urban environments. And I'll be sure to include that in the resources that we'll send out after this about some links to some trees. So we have different oaks. We have other different native trees, such as bald cypress is a great urban street tree because it's used to actually being in the swamp where its roots don't get a whole lot of oxygen. And same thing in an urban environment. So it can do that without buckling the paving. And then you have trees such as serviceberry and winter king hawthorn and a few others that aren't as prone to having that topping aspect done to it. I'll say Collier Neely with the Landmark Foundation is also on the call. So I don't know, Collier, if I missed anything or if there's anything else y'all wanted me to review.
I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Great. Well, thank you, Audra. I appreciate your comments. So there's a question about a community garden, and they'll discuss more about how they can get away from traditional plant ideas and gear more towards native plants and food. That's great to hear. That's really the point of these lunchtime discussions, is just starting to plant little seeds about how we can change and promote some changes to some of our common practices. Okay. Oh, and I did get a reminder that we do have the workshop coming up in June that is for greening our community. So this is a workshop that we as Your Town, Alabama, is hosting with Alabama Communities of Excellence. So the ACE program, Main Street Alabama, and Design Alabama have partnered, and we'll be hosting a workshop in June. It's a one-day workshop in Montevallo. Since we have not had workshops due to COVID in 2020 or 2021, we wanted to make sure that we're still providing all of our Your Town graduates and then all of the other people that want to attend Your Town with some information. So thank you, Jill. Jill did let me know that it is June 17th from 8 to 4, and it is in Montevallo. And you can register for that on Design Alabama and Your Town Alabama. And ACE and Main Street, they are all promoting the workshop right now. And so you can find that on their web pages, or also on social media with the links to the registration for that. And with that workshop, we'll have a lot of different speakers that will be talking about community seeds. So, one of the biggest questions that we always have asked is, how do we fund these things? So there'll be some funding discussions, some partnership discussions, and then also a deeper dive into some of the sustainability and the code discussions that we've talked about. And so mainstreetalabama.org has the actual link for sign up. So we hope that you all will join us for that day. But thank you very much. And if there's no other questions, we'll kind of wrap it up for today. We appreciate you joining us for a quick lunchtime conversation. And then please stay tuned for the upcoming conversations, because we will be hosting this monthly as we move forward. So Collier, can you want to give us a lineup of what the next ones are?
Yeah, so the next talk is going to be Tuesday, June 15th. With Jason Fodron from the KPS group, and we're going to just talk about the wonderful world of municipal planning. And that Eventbrite link is already up, so if y'all want to go ahead and register, that'd be great.
All right. Thank y'all so much. I hope y'all enjoy the rest of your week, and we hope to see you at the next lunchtime. Thank you.